Hi there, everyone, and welcome to That's Her Business. I'm Lisa, and this is
Colette.
And today we're going to be interviewing Professor Claudine Storbeck. Welcome, Claudine. How are you today?
Fine, thank you, and thank you for the invite.
Fabulous. So, Claudine, to start off with, will you tell us a little bit about your work and what exactly, a little bit also about High Hopes and what exactly it's about? Give us a little bit of a rundown on that.
Okay, so I work at the Wits Centre for Deaf Studies. Started working there about 22 years ago. So I launched the centre, and I'm the director of the centre. And about 6, 7, 8 years into the centre, I realised that very few people were focusing on deaf babies and then supporting deaf babies and their families, because when deaf children were going to school, deaf kids are really battling to learn language, and education for the deaf is really not in a good place. And so up until that time, the centre had been training teachers of the deaf. We'd set in place a teacher training program at various levels and been doing well, but not well enough. And so we looked for the best early intervention program we could find, and it was a program based in the US called Sky High, a wonderful curriculum. And so we've imported it and South Africanized it. We've also translated it into 3 languages, and then launched High Hopes, which is a home-based early intervention program. And that is probably the most exciting thing I've ever been involved in. We work with families of deaf babies, just supporting the family through the grief, and it runs for 3 years if Bubby is identified early. And then that should then prepare the baby for school when they enter preschool, 3, 4. And at the moment, we started in Gauteng, and at the moment we're in 6 provinces and growing.
Oh, wow. That's so great.
That's great. So, Claudine, where did your passion for working with the hard of hearing, where did that all start?
That started when I was about 6 or 7. I just knew I was going to do it. I literally told my mom and dad I'm going to work with deaf people one day. I didn't know how. I didn't know what career I'd follow. I just knew I'd work with deaf people. I think most people didn't take me seriously. They thought it was a phase. My dad did. And when I was about 8 or 9, he bought me my first book on deafness called Sign Language by Jim Carl. I've actually never read it. It's like a really complex linguistics book, but it was my first book, and my dad and them took me seriously. And I literally feel like if I weren't working with the deaf, I would probably just sit at home, do nothing. I'd retire. This is kind of the only thing I've ever wanted to do.
Great. So starting High Hopes, getting Wits on board with that, was it a challenge getting such a big gun on board, or was it easy?
I think at the Centre for Deaf Studies, because we'd established ourselves and we've done really well, they learned to respect us as staff members, one deaf, one hearing, and then of course we got a second deaf person join us. But we're working with babies, and I did at the time have a meeting with the Vice Chancellor, who told me that this is a tertiary institute. We do post-school training, and I explained to him that if we didn't do it, no one else would. So we really positioned it as the flagship community service program. So it's the community service program of the Centre for Deaf Studies. But excitingly, because we also collect data, it's a very big flagship research component of the Centre for Deaf Studies, because we collect all this High Hopes data and then can do some analysis. So, it was a bit of a challenge, but actually not. We probably wouldn't have taken no for an answer.
And Claudine, tell me, I'm sure you get a lot of rewards out of doing, what you're doing, but it must also be quite challenging, and you need to also be inspired yourself. So tell me, who is your greatest inspiration? What inspires you?
I think the first thing is that it's a calling. And I've never wanted to do anything else. So it's definitely, I think it's a God thing. I think I've been called by God. I think I've been able to learn sign language extremely easily, because I just have the skills that I was given. Deaf people really inspire me, because I've seen how much they've succeeded despite the challenges, despite just the bad start that they've had. And the other thing that inspired me was the fact that and which is a negative thing initially, is the fact that parents were grieving so much. So I was started out as a teacher. As a teacher, we'd sit in the staff room and people would talk about parents and how bad they were, and how poor the relationship was between these parents and their deaf children. And then I'd see parents come and fetch their kids and just, be so excited to see their child but not be able to communicate, and, walking hand in hand with their little kid home on the weekend. And that was just so saddening for me, so burdening, that was the other inspiration. I think my mom's an inspiration just because she said to me, strong girls don't have friends, don't worry. Strong girls are going to be judged and challenged, don't worry. And so every time I felt challenged and I had these like barriers up to my, head bashing against a wall, I would just go and chat to my mom and just say, whoa. And she'd, no, it's absolutely fine. You'll be fine. I was fine. And so just having someone as a sounding board was great, because it is hard, particularly 22 years ago, being a young woman in the field of academics at a university. Other than that, I don't really have anyone particular that has inspired me, other than, small people over the years. You read a book here, you find a quote there. So it's probably a whole big tapestry of various things.
Great. I noticed in your Twitter bio that you've got unlearn, relearn. Can you tell us what that means to you?
Yes, that is part of the theory of critical pedagogy. So one of the things that we're realizing when you study, when you learn, and particularly challenging adults to learn, is that very often you cannot learn something new until you unlearn your bias, the wrong way of doing it, or the old-fashioned way of doing it. And of course, with children who have very strong opinions about things, one has to be at a place of, humble enough and willing enough to reflect and think about things, and then realize, maybe I need to unlearn that, or put that learning on hold as I learn something new, or being willing to relearn something you already knew. So yeah, it's a very, very exciting, and yet so simple. You kind of think it's so obvious, but continually forcing oneself to be willing to unlearn things, or realize when you've made a mistake, or don't know the best way. So it's a very, it's challenging to be teachable. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's something people have a lot of resistance to.
Yes, all of us. It's very hard to accept when we've done something wrong, or when we need to learn something new.
And Claudine, tell me, what characteristics do you most admire in others, and particularly in the little children who are deaf? What do they actually teach us? What have they got out there to teach us?
Oh my word! I think the biggest, maybe 2 or 3 things I see is their absolute joy at life. And until they realize it through enculturation, and enculturation into the politics and the narrative of the day of oppression and marginalization, but just until then, just that absolute joy at life and taking everything on as if it was normal. So whether they've got challenges with lack of communication, parents that are tough to communicate with, teachers that they battle to communicate with, these kids absolutely exude joy and fun. And then the other thing is just so their ability to always be the one to accommodate. So no matter who they're communicating with, they realize that if they don't adapt, they don't humble themselves, they don't make the changes, they can never communicate. It's just that they're so willing to communicate and adapt. And then their patience with hearing people, because it's really hard to learn to sign, and they're very patient. And actually, they are so resilient. I think resilience is probably their biggest strength. And to be resilient in this, the world of today is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and how would you like to be remembered, Claudine?
It's something that I was thinking about and have been thinking about for a really long time. Mao Zedong has a really beautiful quote that I haven't used for a while, but it was something that really was important for me as we entered the first 10 years of the Center for Deaf Studies, where it talks about, go to the people, be with the people, teach them, train them, and when you leave, let them say that they've done it themselves. And that's always what I wanted to. So, leaving a legacy sounds a bit cliche, But the first time it really impacted me was one of the young ladies that I'd been working with and training and just, really just loved modeling and role modeling with and mentoring. She'd done something really amazing and she didn't thank me. She was in the media and I remember thinking, I can't believe I've done all this. And then I just said, hold on, that's just what I want. Because if she'd been thanking me, if she was so grateful to me, then it was really all about me and not about her. And so it was just, yes, that's what we want. And so I think the greatest thing, or the thing that you want to be remembered by, would be in terms of work, that I've created a center that is sustainable. And that by the time I leave this earth or retire, that the people in it that are leading it can remember me, but it's kind of far back that they are actually the leaders that are taking the role. And then to be remembered by my children, hopefully as a good mother and a good wife. I just never want the boys, because I've got 2 lovely sons and a husband, I just never want them to, be at the funeral and be quite sad that I was not present enough with them as a family because my calling in life took over. So probably both, the personal and the work.
And what piece of advice would you give to other women trying to set up and start their own businesses?
I think the first thing I never did was I never thought of myself as a woman in the field. The only time I was made to feel like a woman in the field was when I went to a university in South Africa, Gauteng, not English speaking, won't use names, not in Joburg, and was talking to them about my program and asking them, can we start it there? And the Dean of Education at the time put his hand behind his head, leaned back, put his feet on the table, in fact, and said to me in Afrikaans, Dametjie, ons werk nie met dowes hier nie. Little lady, we don't work with deaf people here. That was the first time I was like, really? But other than that, just to do what I did to the best of my abilities, plan well so that one can't be challenged or criticized, or at least prepare for as much of that as you can. So always think about, what are the criticisms, what are the shortcomings of the project, and then to be resilient. If people are not going to like you or not accept your project, it may be because you're a woman, or if you're a woman of color, even worse, because there are just so many challenges. But to not fight it as that, take the issues on, take the paradigm, the philosophies that are being challenged and addressed, and then just to use it as, I'll get stronger, my skin will get thicker, I won't take offense, go back. But I think the biggest word of advice would be, don't take no for an answer. I was just like, there is no way they're not going to do it. And there is a saying in the Bible that talks about there is nothing more irritating than a woman like a dripping tap. And I was like, yes, I will. So I don't think, I know when to back off when it was probably not a good idea. But if I know it's a good idea and it's amazing, someone is going to do it. The money will come. It will start. So if someone says no to me, I'm like, great. So it's not going to be there. Now let's find the next place that I can start. So yeah, I just don't take no for an answer.
Be the dripping tap.
And the dripping tap, yeah, never give up.
That's great.
Okay, so our last feature is, because women never really talk about their own accomplishments, we would like you to please blow your own voo-voo and tell us about an accomplishment that you're most proud of.
I think the only thing that I would say I'm proud of is that I was able to get a doctorate early in life, before I had kids, so that I had the time to do it. But recently, I'm most proud of the fact that I've started a publishing house, and that we're publishing children's literature. So there are children's stories with deaf characters in, and really funky kids. And the most recent book is called Mpumi and Jabu's Magic Day, which is currently in the public domain. Yeah, so I'm actually loving just creating resources And I'm proud of the people I see that have developed. So there are just so many people that have joined me and that are now either ahead of me or just amazing leaders that I can literally just step back and not do anything. So I'm proud of them. Yeah, that's about it.
And Claudine, tell me if somebody wants to get involved with your projects, how do they contact you? What should they do? What have you got available? What do you need us to help you with?
Um, there are a couple of ways that people can get involved. The first way is obviously becoming a supporter. In other words, if you follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, and like and share. So it's kind of sharing the message. The more people that know about our message, the more people will start thinking about us when they win the lotto, when they're creating their will. For example, organizations like the SPCA and CHOC, Childhood Cancer, are every single day getting donations from people who 10 years ago put them in their will. People who, 2-3 years ago decided they never want birthday presents in their life again, and they just keep challenging people to give a birthday present in lieu of to the charity. And so it's just the more people that know about High Hopes, the better, because deafness is invisible. People don't just go, oh, look at the puppy, oh, look at the child with no hair, which means we're not saying that's not important, but just let's not forget about the invisible disability like deafness. So number one, just share our message. Number two, become a supporter. So you can give 20 Rand a month, 30 Rand a month. I would rather you give a tiny little bit a month than giving me 2,000 Rand once off. So I'd rather you not feel it. So, donate a cappuccino a week. 25 Rand a week it's less than 100 Rand a month, and commit to it. Think about the party birthday idea. As we get older, we just don't want junk. So it's like, hey, give a birthday present in lieu of me. And then you can volunteer. So volunteers would typically volunteer for 2 to 3 months. You can volunteer as someone in our social media department. You can volunteer in marketing and branding. You can volunteer in helping us write proposals for funding. You can volunteer in saying, I'm going to be with you for 10 months, or I'm going to be with you for 2 months. And in those 2 months, I'm going to find you 10 people who each going to give you 50 Rand a month. That's really not a hard thing to do. But sometimes it's quite hard to ask family and friends for yourself. So actually, you're asking now for someone else. It's really hard for me to challenge people who are my friends. So, would you give 50 Rand a month? It's just so awkward. But you can do it because you're not asking for yourself. So there are actually a lot of ways. And then obviously, if you have the desire to help families that are grieving yourself, you can come on the next training. And so when we do training, we'll have some online training in South African Sign Language, in early intervention and infant development. And you can then get involved as a High Hopes home interventionist.
Fabulous.
Okay. And talking about South African Sign Language, could you just give a quick something for people to learn?
South African Sign Language is amazing. It's, first of all, it is a language in its own right. It is not some monkey language. It's not gesture. And so first sign everyone has to know is this. It's I love you, and it's international. So wherever you use that language, that's our language. And then everyone's got to learn the alphabet. So if you go and look online, or if you've got a copy of the book, the ABC, everyone has to learn the ABC, but you can do that online. And then Roots Resources, our new publishing house, has a free sign language vocab book online. So just go to Roots Resources and you'll download it for free and share it with as many friends as you can, because just saying something like, hello, how are you?
Let's do that. Hello.
How are you?
How are you? Is that right?
Yeah, how are you? And thank you. So if you see a deaf person that's either working at the till or working at a restaurant as a coffee barista or somewhere else, go up to them and say, hello, how are you? Even if you're shy, because no one else typically does. So it's hello, how are you? Thank you. And then nice to meet you. Or if you can't remember nice, good to meet you.
I like that. And I like also how names, deaf people give you a name based on your characteristic. And I remember this was mine because it's a C, Colette.
Yes. So they look at your face, typically at your face, your character, or what you wear a lot. And So my name sign is Claudine because I have a mole under my eye. Yours is because of the ring there.
So what would mine be, Lisa?
So Lisa, deaf people would have to watch you for a while and kind of get to know you, but it's typically something on your face. So if that is your hair often, if that's the kind of hairstyle that you wear, it might be something like your hair or your eyebrows, because it's something that really is a feature that stands out. And sadly, we've had, fat people that have been called fat, and so you've got to have a very thick skin. And so this man, whose name was Carlos, and he got thin as an adult, and his name was still Carlos. And so I hated this mole under my eye, and I was going to have it taken off when I turned 21. But I met deaf people before then, and they called me Claudine, so I had to keep it.
Great. Well, Claudine, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for you for inviting me. I've loved this. Thanks.
Oh, it was absolutely marvelous, and thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.